Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michelle Zielinski, a bladder cancer survivor and a Bladder Cancer Canada volunteer since 2012. I've been on the board of directors, and now I'm actually Bladder Cancer Canada's managing director. We are so pleased that you're joining us this evening for this informative presentation, Coping with Bladder Cancer and COVID with Resilience and F.L.A.R.E. Tonight, we'll hear from two fantastic presenters, Claire Edmonds, a registered psychotherapist, and Bette Thom, another bladder cancer survivor and one of my longtime volunteer mates here in Alberta. As you'll see by reading their bios in the description below this video, they both bring a wealth of experience and expertise to this webinar. Claire and Bette will try to answer as many of your questions as possible via the chat function in the YouTube platform throughout the presentations. And they'll remain online after their presentations conclude until 8:30 p.m. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Claire Edmonds.
Good evening. It's lovely to be here with you today, or this evening. And we're going to talk about something that I think is very important and certainly on most of our minds these days, particularly as we enter the holiday season. So we're going to talk about coping with COVID. And we're going to talk about resilience and something called F.L.A.R.E, which is a coping strategy that we'll go into more detail as we go along this evening. Just as a brief introduction, I'm a registered psychotherapist, but I am also a cancer survivor, someone who has coped with two different forms of cancer that were unrelated to each other, but both challenging in their own ways. And so I come here not just as a professional, but also as somebody who's lived experience. And so I'll probably use both voices this evening as we work through the material and as I respond to your questions. So at the beginning of January 2020, we heard the slow, low rumble of something coming our way. And for some of us, that alarm sounded pretty quickly. And for others of us, we just really couldn't imagine what a pandemic would mean. And so, well, here we are, almost a year later, and I hope a lot wiser. We know exactly what a pandemic means, especially now as we are facing the second wave. So how are we doing? Well, I'm not really sure. I think we must always remember that the novel aspect of the novel coronavirus is very much a part of the story. And we have been here before. In fact, just about 100 years ago, we faced the Spanish flu epidemic. But the world is different now, and it has changed. The bad news is that we travel a lot, and that the world is getting smaller. And in fact, these diseases, like epidemics, are transported around the world like thistledown on the pant legs of travelers. We are also deeply interconnected, and any given product can be made in several different countries or in some distant land, and our supply lines have been disturbed. I've been waiting 6 months for a part for my sewing machine. The good news is that the scientific world has addressed the pandemic really swiftly, and we have inoculations that are being rolled out right now around the world. And in fact, it was just recently that the first woman in Britain received her inoculation. It is a remarkable thing that these vaccines that are being produced, some of them have a stunning 95% effectiveness rate. That's right up there with smallpox and polio vaccines. So much better, say, than the annual flu shot that's only about 40 to 60% effective. So help is on the horizon, but the horizon for many of us will be one long winter away. And in that time, more people will become ill, and sadly, more people will die. And so we live in uncertainty. What is safe? What will happen? How can I protect myself? Masks and hand washing seem so trivial in the face of such an invisible and intimidating foe. And social distancing, well, that just feels like social isolation. And at times when we are stressed, we know the community helps to alleviate our experience of distress. But now, that kind of connection with other people just causes uncertainty and more stress. And to add to the challenge, people who have or have had cancer live with even greater uncertainty. Will I be able to get my regular screening tests? Is it safe to go to the hospital? Will my cancer return? Isn't stress bad for the immune system? Is my immune system going to be strong enough if I do contract it? Is it safe to see my grandchildren? Should my kids be at school? How will we celebrate the holidays as a family? And so the list grows. And then there is that annoying fact that we all experience and handle uncertainty differently. Some of us are cavalier and feel unperturbed by the risks, and others of us are terribly concerned and avoid people at all costs. So it's hard to make sense of it. Social scientists have known that many factors influence our assessment of risk. Family history, temperament, social circumstances, cultural norms. We're just built differently from each other. But here are some questions that can help us understand our own tolerance of risk. This is a picture of the novel coronavirus, which I know you have all seen on television. And it is a remarkable fact that we can now actually visualize a virus. This is a very new development in and of itself. COVID precautions can be uncertain. We're not always sure what we should be doing. And in fact, simple things like grocery shopping can feel like an exercise in managing biohazards. And added to all of this, our tolerance for uncertainty varies. Here are a few questions that we can answer for ourselves to help us understand how we handle uncertainty. So we might ask, do unforeseen events distress me greatly? Does it upset me to not have all the information I need? One should always look ahead to avoid surprises. A small unseen event can spoil everything. And when it's time to act, uncertainty sometimes paralyzes me. I always want to know what the future has in store for me. I can't stand being taken by surprise. And I should be able to organize everything in advance. Someone who says yes to all of those, somebody who likes a fair amount of control in their lives, and uncertainty can be distressing. And some people don't agree with any of those, and they like surprises. They're probably people who like roller coasters too. And it gives us an idea that I may find myself endorsing all of those items and being, yeah, well, uncertainty distresses me. But if I think of my partners or my kids or my parents, they might respond to these questions differently. They probably, or they may, have a higher degree of tolerance for uncertainty. And I sometimes think that coping with cancer, the cancer uncertainty, gives us a better understanding about how to cope with COVID anxiety. After all, as people who have coped as a patient or as a caregiver or are coping with cancer right now, uncertainty is part of day-to-day living. And sometimes, well, we cope well, and some days perhaps a little less well. So even if we tolerate uncertainty pretty well, there'll be some days when it's easier than others. So coping with uncertainty isn't a static thing. It's not a constant state. I can cope pretty well with uncertainty until I'm waiting for my MRI results. Then uncertainty feels very different for me. What can I control? What can I not control? This can be a really important question to ask ourselves. And I think in many ways this is where we start. And it's like the Serenity Prayer. With COVID, there is only so much control any of us have. We can be informed, aware of the numbers, we can listen to healthcare professionals, we can understand the policies that are being made. We can avoid crowds, wear a mask, wash our hands, socially distance when we are out of our homes. However, we can't always control the behavior of others. This is a big one, but remember, We all have a different tolerance to risk. And we may even assess risk differently. So we want to be clear about what we can do and to let go of what is beyond our control. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, it's a lot like coping with cancer. Knowing what we control and what we cannot control. Here's one graphic that describes or helps us decide about the things that we can do, the things that we can manage, and the things that we can't. So under our control are limiting news consumption, not getting tangled up in the CNN rotating news that goes on and on. I was so struck the other day when I noticed that CNN had a sign on it that said, breaking news. And the sign never went away. The news really wasn't breaking. It was the same cycle that I had seen a couple of hours ago. So it's not like it's breaking news. It's more like it's broken news going round and round. So we may want to limit how much information we are taking in and making sure that we're not taking in information that's inaccurate. So we want it to come from healthcare professionals or from government officials. So you know the route here: washing hands, social distancing, limiting travel. Have you also thought about kindness and self-compassion? Not judging yourself for some of the feelings that you're having around COVID and cancer. Now, the things that are outside of your control, well, some of that's the uncertainty that we're coping with. There are things that we can't manage to control. We can't control other people. We can't control the accuracy of the statistics. We don't really know when the pandemic will end, at least for us as individuals, when we'll get our inoculations. We don't know whether the virus will evolve. And in some ways, we can't control our own anxiety. I'm not so sure I'm a complete fan of that idea. I think there are lots of things that we can do to manage our anxiety. And I'm hoping that's one of the things that we will talk about today. So here we are, managing with F.L.A.R.E. What does F.L.A.R.E. mean? Well, this model comes from Ina Kazan, who's a clinical psychologist from Harvard, and I kind of liked her style. And so she talks about this idea of F.L.A.R.E. standing for feel, label, allow, respond, and then expand awareness. So what will that mean for me? What would that look like? This interesting looking diagram is a feeling wheel, an emotional wheel. And if we look right into the middle of it, we'll see that there's some pretty basic experiences, emotional experiences. Sad, joyful, powerful, scared, mad, and peaceful. And each of those words is further broken down into other aspects of that feeling. So let's take powerful. I might be proud, respected, feeling appreciated. I might be hopeful, feeling important, feeling faithful. And if I go right back further, I might be cheerful, satisfied, feeling valuable, worthwhile, intelligent, confident. Now, I don't agree with all of these words. I think some of them are a little odd, but that's okay. The goal of this wheel of emotions is to help us take a feeling, kind of break it down a little bit so that I can be maybe a little more precise. So if I'm feeling sad, is it just sadness? Well, let me look. I could be guilty, ashamed, depressed. Actually, I think lonely and bored is one of the feelings that comes up for me with COVID. And then if I go a little further, I might feel inadequate and a little apathetic. So what this wheel does is it gives us more words for feelings, which is really helpful when we want to talk about our feelings and begin to identify them. So if I notice, for instance, that I'm having an emotional feeling, I kind of have a choice. I can stuff it back down and not acknowledge it. The difficulty with that is it takes a lot of energy to suppress feelings, to shove them down and ignore them. In fact, sometimes they come out kind of sideways. We might take it out on other people. That old adage of don't kick the dog is a way we displace big feelings that we have, and we kind of download them on something that's not important or not the real issue. And so this emotion wheel can give us a chance to begin to identify emotions. Perhaps there's a feeling of tension in my body, maybe a feeling of nausea a little bit there. So I want to have a look because I'm feeling something and I'm not sure what it is, but I'm beginning to think I'm feeling scared. And then I can go a little further into that, a little anxious maybe, a little helpless, okay, maybe a little weak, maybe a bit discouraged. So I'm beginning to draw a picture of how I'm feeling emotionally. Now I can describe in words how I feel, and I can begin to look at them. Perhaps, why am I feeling this way? Well, I've got very aged parents, and I'm a little scared for them, and I feel helpless that I can't change things for them. And I get discouraged because I know that they're sad and they want to see their grandchildren, and that's not possible right now. I can begin to map these feelings onto some of my thoughts and experiences, and I can validate those feelings. We can also sometimes do this with cancer. This kind of emotion wheel can also be helpful in identifying the feelings that I might have as I think about those tests that are coming up in a few months, and I might be feeling, probably not feeling joyful. I might be feeling grateful that I get to have tests. But I can begin to look at the circle and begin to think about what am I feeling, and I can express it, acknowledge it, and feel free or freer from the burden of carrying those feelings and shoving them down. I can actually bring them to light and let them go. And so where can I explore these feelings? How can I move these feelings, now that I've identified them, out into the world so that I'm not holding on to them so tightly? These are some of the basic emotions that people can feel. Another way of looking at that emotion wheel. And so expressing feelings can be done in lots of different ways. Journaling can be really helpful. Journaling is a private place where we begin to write down some of the feelings. And I might actually start with some of the feelings from that emotion wheel. Sadness and all of the other feelings that are attached to that describe my experience. I don't have to use sentences. I don't have to have good spelling. I can toss grammar out. I can write harshly, or I can write with a flowing hand. Some people like to type. I'm not a fan of either way in particular. I think that whatever feels right to you. But the idea is it's a private place to put our feelings out there. And if you explain to family members why you're journaling, and perhaps even get them a journal so they can do the same thing, they'll understand that journals are private, not to be shared, not to be read by other people. There are other ways of expressing feelings: talking to friends, talking to therapists, getting together for a Skype call with friends over a cup of coffee, doing artwork, collage, painting, sketching. It doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be good. It can just be a way of moving out your feelings. Music. I love music. I think sometimes when I can't find the words for my own feelings, I can put on music that captures it for me and expresses it. And sometimes even movement can be a good part of that. Dancing, going for a walk, getting outside, moving the feelings out. Well, we also want to be very aware of when feelings get stuck. Sometimes feelings get stuck inside of us, and it's not the feeling depressed that's a problem. It's when we're not talking about it and getting help for that. So if I find myself spinning around a distressing feeling a lot, like fear or anxiety or sadness, it may be time to find someone that I can talk to outside of my family, someone who can really listen and offer me ways of coping. So a therapist can be really helpful, helping to move stuck feelings so that you have more space for joy and pleasure and the things that make life worth living. So we want to label the situation. I want to be able to say, this is COVID stress. This is cancer stress. This is work stress. These labeling processes of allowing us to label the experience that we're having helps us to feel more in control. Here's a picture of our brains. So right there, deep in the center of the brain, is a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of us that has big feelings. It gets panicked. It gets scared. It gets angry. It's the part of us that's a bit prone to tantrums and to very strong feelings and feeling out of control. When the amygdala is active, part of what activates it is that sense of not having any control. Now, the prefrontal cortex is up here, and this is sort of the advanced brain. This is the most developed part of the brain. This is where we do our thinking. And this is the part of us that labels an experience as, oh, that's stress related to COVID. Oh, okay, that's stress that's related to my upcoming doctor's appointment. When I label it with my frontal cortex, the amygdala hears that. And the amygdala says to itself, okay, we know what it is. It's not mysterious. We're under control. Someone's driving the car, and that's the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is in control, so I can relax a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why labeling a situation can help calm the fear center of the brain. And it helps click in the decision-making part of the brain, the problem-solving part of the brain, which calms everything down. And so what's step 3? Allowing the moment. Allowing yourself to experience the uncertainty. The fact that there's uncertainty isn't under your control. You're going to end up wasting valuable time, effort, and energy, futile efforts to get rid of uncertainty. It's here. It's right now. COVID, and to some extent cancer, involve uncertainty, and we just have to allow that. We have to allow ourselves to say, hey, yeah, it's okay to feel this way about uncertainty. Some people may benefit from a limited exposure to COVID information to allow themselves to understand the moment. But as I said before, it's very easy to become overwhelmed with too much news. We get hypervigilant sometimes when we're distressed. That means we become very alert, looking for information to take into our brains to do the problem solving. Allowing the moment is just taking a moment to sit with it, to feel it, to notice it, and to soothe yourself and say it's okay to feel this way. We've never been here before. This is a novel coronavirus. This is what novelty feels like. It's okay. So where do we go from here? Step 4, we want to respond. We want to respond to the what ifs. What if I get it? What if my parents get it? What if the kids get it at school? Sometimes we want to say, I don't know. I honestly don't know what we'll do, but we'll figure it out. Taking slow, deep breaths to slow yourself down can be really helpful. And if we go back to thinking about the brain, those slow, deep breaths are a way to communicate to the body that it's okay, that we're safe, that we're taking control. We take control of the breathing, and it physiologically helps us to relax. You can remind yourself of the things that you are doing. Okay, so I'm socially isolating, I'm washing my hands, I'm not visiting my parents so that they're less likely to catch it. Take a news break. Enough. No more Wolf Blitzer. And I also want to be aware of something that I'm calling COVID inertia. COVID inertia is this very strange kind of response that I'm noticing in myself and others. This sense of lassitude, of not having the energy or motivation to get up and do something. So, for example, I've got a very dear friend with a lung condition who is actually living at her cottage right now. And I miss her dreadfully. And I keep saying to myself, I've got to email her. I've got to email Kathy. And there's just something that kind of stops me. It prevents me from moving forward. And then finally, I got myself in hand and said, stop it, Claire, it's time. So I emailed her and said, Kathy, how are you? I'm so sorry. I haven't reached out enough. And she said, Claire, you and me both. I get this awful sense of inertia. And we were laughing. And I think there is something about all of the changes that kind of leaves us stuck sometimes. And so we want to be aware of it, and we want to take it into hand. Reach out to others safely. Start a new hobby. Pursue a new interest. I'm quilting, which is sad because I've just worn out my sewing machine. I've got to get it fixed somehow. People are learning languages, taking up art. The YouTube has got some amazing videos to learn new things that you might want to do. Knitting, things that you may not have thought about. Woodworking, all kinds of hobbies that you've often said, I'd like a chance to learn how to do that. Well, perhaps COVID is your chance. Taking a walk. There's nothing more healing than taking a walk, because it gives you slow, deep breaths to slow you down. Slow, deep breaths to give you a relaxing sort of internal massage as your shoulders drop. And I know there are lots of new COVID puppies. I don't get to get a COVID puppy, but my neighbors have one. And so I get to go for walks and talk to all the new little dogs in our neighborhood. Helping someone else. I heard of a project the other day in which people were writing letters to seniors in senior citizens' homes, places where they're not getting visitors. And so they just write a letter about a story or anything really. They don't have to give their names or their addresses. It's not an ongoing relationship, but it's an opportunity to have that sense that you're really helping someone else. And that often helps us feel more in control. The final part of the process is to expand our perspective. It's so easy to get caught into the moment. It's so easy to think that this will never end. Well, we're beginning to understand that maybe by summer, we'll really have a lot of people inoculated with the vaccine. But this summer, things may really change. And so I need to understand that the world is bigger than this moment. And that even taking a walk can clear my head and spend time amongst the trees and the snow, even though you may not like snow too much, that sense of fresh air. Maybe walk with somebody else, maybe take that dog out. Anything that helps expand your perspective. One of the things that I like to do is watch gardening shows. It helps me think about my own garden. It helps me think about summer. It helps me think about things that are beautiful, like plants. And so that helps expand my awareness. It shifts my attention from the internal sensations into something that is beautiful, that is around me. It's a form of mindfulness. Maybe some of you already have your own mindfulness practice. This is a mantra for uncertainty, which Kristin Neff, who is a psychologist, has talked about in some of her work. And we can say to ourselves, this is a moment of uncertainty. Uncertainty is hard to bear. All people feel this sometimes. May I be kind to myself. May I find peace and contentment. You may not find that mantra specifically helpful to you, but you may find another mantra, such as, I'm loved, I'm safe, in this moment I'm okay. I don't know what will work for you, but it is a way to move our attention from feeling overwhelmed to feeling more in control. This too shall pass. This will be one of those things that we tell our grandchildren about and our great-grandchildren. There will be photographs of this in someone's presentation in 50 years when they say, back in 2020, there was another epidemic. This too shall pass, and we are resilient. And I think that coping strategies can be developed as we move along. There are resources such as Wellspring that has lots of different strategies for helping you cope. Relaxation and guided imagery. They even have a program on COVID and cancer. It helps us move beyond worrying into taking care of ourselves. We also want to be kind to the people around us, that sometimes the stress and tension bubbles up and over and we take it out on other people, particularly when we're dealing with a system such as the medical system. We can feel overwhelmed and anxious and scared. And sometimes we turn and we take it out on the people who are around us, like healthcare professionals. They too are stressed and worried. Many of them worried about the same things you are. What will I do if I catch COVID? How will I work? How can I help others? So when we find ourselves in one of those moments when things are bubbling up and we're feeling not terribly in control, and we want to download some of that tension, start with a breath. Take a few deep breaths and say to yourself, this too shall pass. So here are a few ways of coping with uncertainty. Back to F.L.A.R.E. Feel. Notice your experience. Does it feel like tension in your body, your chest, your shoulders, heavy head, or stomach pain? Use that emotion wheel or whatever technique you like to identify the feelings that are driving those sensations. Give it a short name. Label it like, oh, this is COVID anxiety, or that's not helpful thinking, or that's worrying thoughts, or I'm anticipating things that haven't happened yet. Then allow yourself to experience the uncertainty. Remind yourself it's okay to feel this way. You're not alone. Lots of people are dealing with this kind of uncertainty. It's okay to feel it. And then respond to that discomfort. Say, I don't know what I'll do. It's okay not to have a plan. Take some slow, deep breaths. Disengage from unhelpful thinking. Go for a walk. And then expand your awareness. Take in the sights and the sounds around you. Focus on the present instead of the uncertainty. Do something that helps you feel good. And so to finish, we are living in uncertain times. And uncertain times are uncomfortable, but they can also be rich times for learning and understanding what really matters to us. I can't wait for COVID to pass so I can be with family again. I can't wait for having a different kind of Christmas next year. I can learn to enjoy the peacefulness of my house. I am now knitting my second sweater. Probably not very well, but I'm enjoying doing it. There are things that we can learn during this period. We can write about it in a journal. Somebody was saying that these kinds of journals will be precious in the future when people want to understand what COVID was really like to live with. So I wish you all the very best in coping with your uncertainty, knowing that you're not alone. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Bette Thom because she's going to have some ideas about resources that are out there to help us all. Thank you so much. Take good care.
Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be part of this presentation and hope that you will all learn a little something that you can take home and try on for yourself. What I'm going to share this evening is my experience with bladder cancer and how I came to thrive with it. I'm using my own experience as well as what I learned when I had the privilege of working with many patients and family during my healthcare career. And we are going to share a little bit about our Edmonton support group. We started planning for this about 7 years ago, and we've actually been running almost continually for 6 years, even with the COVID dynamic, because we've changed to a different format. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I can remember with absolute clarity the day that I was told I probably had bladder cancer. I didn't quite believe the urologist, but he said, no, I'm almost 100% sure it is bladder cancer. And my first thought was disbelief. How the heck could I have cancer? I felt so well. The only symptom I had was one episode of blood in my urine, and there was no family history. So there was disbelief, but there was also terror. From what I knew, people died from cancer. I didn't know very many people who lived with it and survived it and went into remission. It felt like I was a ship at sea, and the There were many rocky precipices and many rocks that I wanted to avoid. And I didn't know how to do that. And I thought, I need a lighthouse. Where is my light to get me through this, to navigate this treacherous sea? And that's when I came up with coping strategies that have worked for me before and what I learned from other people. So let's look at where my lights were. My strategies, my lights, the first was to create a support network. I decided that I was going to be very open about what was going on with me, with people I trusted, because I knew that I need to be able to talk about it. The more people that I could tell about it, the less power the cancer diagnosis had. It seemed that as I talked about it, it became less scary. Now, not all of us have the same circle of friends or family. Sometimes we're isolated, sometimes we're more private. So where can we go for support? There's Bladder Cancer Canada. There's one-on-one peer support with them. There's some fabulous guidebooks that help you be prepared for what's coming on. There's also discussion forums. You can type in anonymously and ask a question. So that's a good one. Wellspring has some excellent programs. Wellspring.ca has some online programs to help you with coping. The Canadian Cancer Society, your local cancer center. The other big one for me was my family doctor. He was a source of support. As I was waiting, we know that there's always kind of a delay. Well, not always, but there's a delay when you get the diagnosis and then you're waiting for the actual surgery and you may be going for a bunch of tests and all of that. So my doctor was able to keep me calm. One thing I want to mention is that when I'm talking about my coping strategies, the light that helped me navigate treacherous water worked for me. They may not work for you. We're all made up differently. I became really aware of this many years ago when my mother had a serious heart attack at age 65, and there was some question about whether she would survive. I gathered with my brothers in my hometown and watched how we dealt with things differently. My one brother and I wanted to be busy. We cleaned the pool, we gardened, we did yard work, we just were busy. My other brother sat in a chair. Now that's very different for him because he's usually the type A behavior who's always constantly on the move. But no, he was the one who sat. Was one better than the other? No, we're just made up differently. I also felt it was really important that I have knowledge, that I knew what to prepare for, that I had information. To me, it is power. So I reviewed the information. I went looking. I would caution that you find reliable sources like Bladder Cancer Canada or the BCAN, which is the American version. You want to make sure that it's reliable and accurate. Also, be cautious. Pace yourself. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. You can start looking at what the prognosis is, and that's only a number. You're not there yet. Start with what you're at. I'm going to go for a turbot. What does that look like? What do I need to prepare myself for that? I'm going to have to maybe go for chemo or have BCG. What does that look like? What does radiation look at? Pace yourself. Another big aspect for me was spirituality, prayer, meditation. Somebody once told me that prayer was talking to God, meditation was listening to God. And I found myself meditating every day and journaling, writing out my feelings, writing out what was going on, just as a reminder to me of this. One of the things that I listened to every day was a poem by John O'Donoghue called A Blessing for a Friend on the Arrival of Illness. Now, if you don't know John O'Donoghue, he's an Irish poet and theologian. He has different prayers, different blessings for any number of occasions, and I always find him to calm me. You can find the poem on the internet if you Google him. You can also get a recording of him actually saying this prayer. And so I would play this every day. And what better thing could there be than to have somebody speaking in a lovely Irish accent? I'll just share a few stanzas from his poem. that I found helpful. And I think it's not only talking about cancer, but it's other times of uncertainty, just like cancer. So here it is, and I can't unfortunately do it with an Irish accent. A blessing for a friend on the arrival of illness. Now is the time of dark invitation, beyond a frontier that you did not expect. Abruptly, your old life seems distant. You barely noticed how each day opened a path through fields never questioned, yet expected deep down to hold treasure. Now your time on earth becomes full of threat. Before your eyes, your future shrinks. You live absorbed in the day-to-day, so continuous with everything around you that you could forget you were separate. May grace come to restore you to balance. May it shape a new space in your heart to embrace this illness and as teacher who has come to open your life to new worlds. May you find in yourself a courageous hospitality towards that which is difficult, painful, and unknown. Now, just as a little side note, I'll share something with you. So every night I would play this poem when I went to sleep, and I would listen to John O'Donoghue's Irish voice, calming and soothing me. My actual surgery was later on in the day, so I had the morning to have time to prepare. And as I hadn't slept well, so I was just resting on the bed, and for some unknown reason, my phone spontaneously started to play this poem. So I took that as a sign that somebody was looking out for me. I think visualization is another way to cope. And some people find that they like to imagine that they're fighting war with the cancer, that they're destroying it. That didn't work for me. I'm not a violent person, and I couldn't see, even though I didn't want the cancer, I couldn't see killing the cancer. So instead, I viewed the cancer as an unwelcome guest that had overstayed their welcome, and it was time for them to leave. So I visualized helping the cancer pack its bags, and I actually gave it a little boot out the door. It gave me a little laugh, but it also helped me feel that I had some control in what was going on. I found I needed to be patient with myself and to trust that things would work out. Some people talk about maintaining a positive attitude. One of our group members, who's a volunteer as well and also co-facilitator of the group, Jerry Majeko, he talks about keeping your eye on the prize. Look ahead. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to be positive. I can't always be positive. So for me, I needed to take the attitude of expect the best and prepare for the worst. I need to have a plan B. If this didn't work, what would I do? That kind of thing. So I tried to maintain positive most of the time, but I also allowed the feelings of doubt, of insecurity, of sorrow, of anger to come through. Another light that has helped me through many difficult times is adopting an attitude of gratitude. At the end of each day, I would find at least 3 things to be grateful for. Now, they might be big things, like I finally got my MRI, or little things like, oh, the coffee was good, whatever it is. But I think it sets you up during the day, because you're trying to find something to be grateful for, to looking for the positive. I am a positive person anyway, so I used this attitude of gratitude to find the good things. The world felt hostile, and I felt alone in it. But when I adopted this practice of gratitude, then I could be optimistic and positive. During this time, self-care is so important too. Eat well, exercise, get out in nature. As Claire said, going for a walk is so healing. I found myself just sitting, it was springtime, and I would just sit and watch the grass grow almost. I watched it turn color, actually. So pamper yourself. Be kind to yourself. Some people suggested that I might want to go on a trip before the actual surgery, but we weren't able to fit that in because of all the tests and scans and things I needed. We weren't able to do that, but we did plan one for after the surgery was over. Whatever feelings there are, allow them space. As Claire showed with her feeling wheel, I'm going to use that to look more at my feelings, to unwrap them more. Okay, I'm scared. What's under that? I'm mad. What's under that? To really assert it. And I'm going to use the F.L.A.R.E to be able to understand my feelings better. I had mentioned that I created my own healing circle, but I didn't tell you how I kept them informed of what was going on. Now, I know that some people use Facebook or Caring Bridge. With Facebook, they create a private group. And with Caring Bridge, that is a free website that allows you to journal, and then you invite people to join. Only the people that you invited can see what you've been journaling or what you've been updating. Sometimes you find that when you're going through the treatment, you don't have the energy to talk to everybody. So instead, you would use this as a way to update people. What I did was I just created an email group list and would let them know. But my husband was online that after my surgery, he was going to update them if I didn't feel up to it. So that was the way in which I kept my group, my healing circle, informed. I found that it was important for me to talk to a lot of people, as I said before, that I could debrief with them and allow myself to take the power away from the cancer diagnosis. When I was working, I found that the patients and families who were able to laugh at themselves did better. So I thought it was important to always to have a laugh a day, to include humor. So I read the comics, I looked at cartoons, I watched comedies on TV. I reflected on the irony of life and looked at it with kind of a chuckle. Those helped me. Those are the lights of the lighthouse that helped me navigate that treacherous sea. And I can honestly say that when I went for the surgery, I had I came from a place of calm, that whatever happened, I would get through it. And I did. And there has been some blips where there's been other situations occur where I felt my health was threatened. And again, I went back to these strategies. So when I was going through this, I just really wished that I had someone to talk to. And so when Bladder Cancer Canada had a webinar here a presentation here in Edmonton, they asked for volunteers who might want to start a support group. So we decided to, because we wanted people not to feel alone. Now let's look at our support group. What's it all about? It's a safe place to find solutions, to share, to laugh, sometimes to cry, and to find hope. Now you look at this was one of our original meetings 6 years ago, and we've grown from there. Some of these people have gone on to volunteer with us, become peer support, help with our awareness walk, all of that. So let's look at what some of the themes are that we talk about in our support group. The big one is what to expect. What's it going to be like to live with a bag? What's it going to be like to live with a neuro bladder? How do I live with this? How can I achieve a sense of normalcy in the midst of this? Will I still be able to travel? Will I swim? Can I play golf? Can I work? Can I walk? How can I talk to my family and friends about this? As a caregiver, how do I best support my loved one? How do I support them but also look after myself? What was your experience with my kind of cancer? What are the pros and cons of different bladder diversions? Sometimes people are having to choose, will I have an ileal conduit or will I have a neobladder? What will I work? Which one works best for me? How was it for you? How do I cope? What resources are available in the community? I mentioned earlier that wellspring.ca has some online programs. There's your Canadian Cancer Society. There's your Wellspring. You may look at private counseling. There's lots of support available. Again, family doctor. What is the impact of COVID-19 on my quality of life? Because I'm immunocompromised, my family don't want me to go out or do anything. What's going to happen with how am I going to keep on with this? I miss my family. I miss my grandkids. The surging number of COVID patients in hospital delayed my surgery. What effect does that have on my life expectancy? These are very common themes. We have run almost continually, except for Christmas off and one snowstorm, since 2014. With COVID, we knew that we couldn't meet in person, so we had to figure out a different thing. So we decided to do Zoom. This is actually not the virtual Zoom support group. This is a committee that has arisen out of our support group, and this is our walk planning committee. I wasn't able to do a Zoom picture of our support group because I didn't have their permission. And we make it very clear at the very beginning of any support group that that privacy is of utmost importance, and that we want to respect one another and not share anything out of the group. So this gives you an idea of what we might look like. We're all wearing our yellow shirts, but we wouldn't usually do that at the support group. So it's not the same as being there in person, but it's still a place where we can support one another, where we can share our experience. I'll tell you a little bit about one of our volunteers, Ina Rurka. It took her a year after her cancer diagnosis and neobladder to be able to come to the group because she was done with cancer. She didn't want to talk about it anymore. She didn't want to go a place where, you feel sorry for yourself. Oh, I've had cancer. She was a different place. But she came to the group and she said, I realized that this is a place where you find solutions. You problem solve. It's a place where we can support one another. And that's what our group is all about. So there is hope. There is a place where you can go. Our group is open to anyone across Canada, and we are very available. The other places, as I mentioned before, are the one-to-one peer support through Bladder Cancer Canada. So you are not alone. Have hope.
Wow. Breathe. I just want to take a breath here. This resonates for me on so many levels, and I can't thank you enough, both Claire and Bette, for all that you've brought to us today. There's so much valuable information here. So please accept my sincere thanks to the both of you for all that you've put forward for us, because there's helpful information here, not just for today, but going forward. My hope is that everyone watching will take at least 2 to 3 learnings from these presentations and apply them in their own lives. Learning to cope doesn't happen overnight, but if we're gentle with ourselves, take baby steps, and aim for consistency with those steps, then we too can become better prepared for the long run. As mentioned earlier, Claire and Bette will remain online until about 8:30 to answer a few more questions via the chat function, so please stick around. And whatever you do, remember that Bladder Cancer Canada is here for you. So if you need information or support at any time throughout your treatment or recovery, our trained one-to-one peer support volunteers are just a phone call or email away. We also encourage you to join our online discussion forums, our Zoom support group meetings, or subscribe to our newsletter at our website at bladdercancercanada.org. And as Claire and Bette also mentioned, Wellspring offers a multitude of online support programs now, and that's through wellspring.ca. Before we wrap up, I'd be remiss if we didn't give a shout out to our generous industry sponsors. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to offer events like these at no cost. And finally, we invite you to volunteer with us. If and when you're ready, there are so many ways that you can help us to fulfill our mission to support patients, increase awareness of bladder cancer, and fund research. Wishing you all well in mind, body, and spirit, and please do stay in touch. Thanks very much.